Chapter 5 Mother's Bathing Suit. All of us, but especially Anne, were glad to see our cottage at Nantucket. Dad had named the cottage The Shoe in honor of Mother, because he said she was like the old lady who lived in one. The Shoe was flanked by two circular lighthouses, which Dad had bought years before from the government. One lighthouse had been used by Dad as a study, and the other by us as an overflow dormitory. We wondered how Nantucket was going to be without Dad. He had left his mark on every room in the Shoe. There were the dot and dash messages he had painted on the ceiling over our beds. The summer he decided we should learn the Morse code. There was the astronomical diagrams he had painted billboard fashion on the dining room walls, showing the size of the Earth and the other planets as compared with the big stars. There were photographs of nebulae and constellations that had been given Dad by Harvard University, and which he had hung only 2 feet from the floor, so that even the smallest child could see them. We went from room to room looking at everything and finding it good. The trunks had followed us from the express office at the dock. Martha opened them in the dining room, found a comfortable chair, and started giving instructions about unpacking them. Everyone came and got his clothes and put them in the barouche. Tom fed the animals and cleaned the kitchen. Frank and Bill put up the screens. Anne and Ernestine swept away a winter's accumulation of sand. "That's the most efficient house opening we've ever had," Anne told us when we were through. Everyone did a fine job, particularly Martha on the packing. "Martha is Dad all over again," Ernestine agreed. "She's naturally efficient." Martha grinned happily, pushed herself up from the chair, and started over to the trunks to get her own clothes. Someplace between the chair and the trunks, a terrible realization struck her. She knew the trunks would be empty, and they were. She knew, too, there wasn't any use asking if anyone had picked up her clothes by mistake. "Don't anybody ever say I'm efficient again," she squealed. "Oh, of course you're efficient," said Anne. "Stop fishing for any more compliments. I just finished saying you did a fine job on the packing, and we've got everything we need." "We haven't got my clothes or a bathing suit," Martha shouted, "and we need those. I haven't got a stitch except what I came with on my back." "Nonsense," Anne said. "They must be around here someplace. Who took Martha's clothes?" Martha shook her head, and she was near tears. "No use looking. I remember now. I didn't pack them." "But the check-off list," Anne said. "How could you forget your own clothes?" "I don't know. You sure you didn't pack them?" "The check-off lists were for everybody else," Martha said. "Since I was doing the packing, there wasn't any use to have one for me." "Oh, Lord, that means we'll have to get you a whole new outfit." "No, we won't," Martha insisted. "The budget can't stand it. I'll go around in a barrel first." The boys started giggling, and Anne and Ernestine couldn't help but join in. Bill sat down in the chair Martha had vacated and made believe he was thumbing through a sheaf of papers. "Name?" he asked Martha. "Speak out so we can hear you," said Frank. Martha managed a sick grin. "Mud," she said. "I admit it. Age, almost 15. Favorite pastime, eating crow." Anne still wanted Martha to go down to the village and buy some clothes and a bathing suit, but Martha was determined not to waste the money. "I just need some things to bum around in," she said. I'm not a boy-crazy flapper trying to impress an Amherst man. I'll find something." Anne and Ernestine agreed they'd hand down some clothes, and Frank said he'd hand up a sweater and some jerseys and a pair of dungarees. "Swell," Martha said. "I don't have to worry about a bathing suit, because I can wear Mother's until she gets here. And I'll write her to be sure she can pick up my suit when she stops at Montclair." "I can see you in Mother's suit," Ernestine scoffed. "Why, it's practically a gay 90s model." "Who cares about that?" Martha said. "All I want is something to cover me up. You two make me sick." Mother wasn't a swimmer and did not like the water. She did occasionally wade in up to her knees, splash some water on her shoulders, duck down almost to her elbows, and then hurry home. If she met any of us en route to the beach, she'd inform us through blue lips and chattering teeth that the surf that day seemed particularly refreshing. The waves on the bathing beach never got more than a foot high during a full gale, but even in a flat calm it was surf to Mother. Mother's suit left nothing exposed. Even Dad, who insisted that the girls wear black, old-fashioned models, had to admit that Mother carried modesty a little to the extreme, and that she seemed to put on more than she took off when she prepared to go in the water. Her suit had numerous appurtenances, including a sash and a bandana, but its two principal components were a black undergarment that started with a hug-me-tight neck and ended several inches below the knees, and a long, huge, black, billowing outer garment that Dad said might be useful to Barnum and Bailey if it were dyed khaki. The outer garment had long sleeves and hung down to Mother's ankles, which themselves were encased in black cotton stockings and high bathing shoes. Mother's suit is out of the question, Anne told Martha. You look completely ridiculous in it. If it's good enough for Mother, said Martha, it's good enough for me. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, talking about her clothes like that. It's not that her clothes are that ridiculous, Anne said. A few years ago, everybody wore suits like that, and a good many people Mother's age still do. But it would look ridiculous on you. It's not much more ridiculous than the suits Dad made us wear, Martha protested. We have to wear a black thing underneath and a assorted dress, too. I know it, Anne admitted, but at least ours end at the knee and have short sleeves. It had taken Anne years to get Dad to allow her and the other girls to bob their hair and wear short skirts, silk stockings, and teddies. Dad hadn't approved of the style trends that had been set since the war. He said they were purely temporary, that the girls would eventually come to their senses, and the fact that everyone else dressed that way made no difference. He had refused to yield any more than the sleeves and a couple of inches around the hems of the girls' swimming outfits. It was a sore point with the two oldest girls. Martha kept insisting to Anne that she would look all right in Martha's suit, and Anne finally gave in. All right, Anne said. If you don't care how you look, I suppose I don't. And since none of us would go out with boys until Mother gets here, I guess you can't do Ernestine and me any permanent damage. Frank, Bill, and the younger children already had on their suits, and the two boys took the younger ones down to the beach, which was only a couple 100 yards from the cottage. Martha said she would slip on Mother's suit and join them. Anne and Ernestine had to finish sorting sheets and blankets, and told Martha that they would be down in about half an hour. It was late afternoon when the two oldest girls finally reached the beach. Both of them were tired from the journey to Nantucket and the housework. They sighed with relief as they sank down in the warm sand, where all of us but Martha was sitting. Martha was the best swimmer and the diver in the family, and she could stay in the water for hours without getting cold. This is the life, said Anne, stretching herself contentedly. This is what I've been dreaming of ever since the chicken pox. I think everything is going to be much more simple from now on. Will you take me out to cover my head? Jack asked her. Frank took us in, but he won't take us over our heads. In a little while, Anne agreed sleepily. I just want to get a little of what sun's still left. She lay down flat on her back. Will someone make that dog stop shaking sand all over me? Frank leaned over and whacked Mr. Chairman, but it didn't do any good. Nobody ever takes me over my head, Jack complained. Where's Martha? Ernestine asked, out at the raft. Frank nodded. How does she look in Mother's suit? Man, she looks grand, Frank said enthusiastically. You ought to see her. I'll bet, Ernestine smiled. Miss Atlantic City of 1890. She's out there, said Frank, with that tall, skinny man we saw on the boat. Anne sat up suddenly, now wide awake. Morton Dykes, she said. You mean he's seen Martha in that outfit? My cow, what will he think of us now? What do you care? Ernestine grinned. Your feelings for him is dead, remember? Completely dead, Bill echoed. He doesn't seem to mind the way her suit looks, Frank said. Every time she dives, he helps her back on the raft. You'd think she was crippled or something. Anne shaded her eyes and looked out toward the float. It was easy to pick out Morton because he stood almost a foot taller than anyone else. At first she couldn't spot Martha, though. "I don't see anyone in Mother's suit," she said. "It ought to be conspicuous enough." Then a trim, curvy, black-clad figure hit the springboard and went into a beautiful jackknife that was unmistakably Martha's. A redhead emerged from the water, and a hand waved casually to the tall boy on the raft, who waved back vigorously. There was a wake of spray as Martha Australian crawled back to the beach. "Where did she get that suit?" yelled Ernestine, who had seen the dive too. "What would Dad say?" "What will Mother say?" Anne asked. Martha blew water out of her nose, tossed the hair out of her eyes, and started up to the beach to join us. Frank and Bill, clicking their tongues as loudly as there were a couple of decency leaguers who had stumbled into a nudist camp, ran to her with towels. They made a great pretense of turning their heads away and hiding their eyes with their hands. The beach wasn't very crowded at the time of day, but those who were there were sitting up and watching. "You boys, stop that," Anne Stage whispered. "I'm ashamed of you." "Here, Martha, quick," Frank said, pretending not to hear. "Drape these towels around you. If you hurry, the beach police may not even notice." "Besides," said Bill, "we don't want you to catch pneumonia." "Would you two?" Martha inquired good-naturedly, pushing the towels aside, and them also. "Like a good punch in the nose." She sank down nonchalantly in the sand between Anne and Ernestine, and attempted to even old scores with Mr. Chairman by shaking her wet hair at him. "Boys," she said, "that water is really the cat's." She didn't seem to notice Anne and Ernestine's frigid stares. "Saw a friend of yours out there," she told Anne. "What a wet smack. You ought to see him in a bathing suit, more of a beanpole than ever." Martha was wearing what appeared to be a tight-fitting black union suit. If you looked at it closely, you could tell it was the underpart of Mother's suit, with the legs and the sleeves rolled up as far as they would roll. It wasn't any more extreme than the bathing suits other girls were wearing. But Anne and Ernestine were shocked almost beyond words. "Go back," Anne finally whispered to her, "and get the outer half of it." "The idea!" "Anne," said Ernestine, "roll down those legs." Jack still wanted Anne to take him out over his head, but she didn't hear him. "I blush for you," Anne told Martha. "What will Mother say?" "What have I done?" Martha asked. "What's this all about?" "You know perfectly well," said Anne, "so don't try to act so innocent. If you mean that sheik of yours, don't have to worry. He's a wet smack who always wants to help you up on the raft. I'm wise to him." "Let's leave Morton out of the conversation," said Anne. "I never saw anybody so jealous," Martha complained. "Why, I wouldn't touch your 10-foot beanpole with a pole." "He's not my 10-foot beanpole," said Anne. "And I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the bathing suit." "You said it was all right to wear it." "I said it was all right to wear all of it, not just the under half. You didn't think I was going to wear the outer part too, did you?" "Of course we did," Ernestine said. "You know perfectly well we did." "Oh, that's what you meant when I said I'd look ridiculous." Martha started to laugh. "I can see myself in the black tent, can't you? I don't wonder why you thought everyone would stare at me. Why, I couldn't swim a stroke in that sea anchor. You should have known that." "Martha," said Ernestine. "Listen, Martha, it's not decent. You shouldn't walk out here in your boudoir in that thing. Here, take this towel, dear." "We could bury her with sand until everyone goes home," Fred suggested hopefully. "It shows every curve," said Anne. "It leaves nothing to the imagination." "I'm getting tired of being bossed around," Martha hollered. "Always thinking about how you look and never thinking about how you swim. Besides, there's nothing to imagine." Anne was patient. "You know Dad's rules for girls in this family. Modesty, Martha, modesty. But nobody wears two-piece suits anymore. You think you're flappers, but you don't realize times have changed. I've got a right to live my own life." "You know the rules as well as we do," Anne continued. "Two-piece bathing suits, skirts at least to the knees, black stockings, and a minimum of skin showing." "What would Mother say?" "I'll bet," said Martha. "She'd say times have changed, and I could wear the same kind of suit other girls are wearing. And I'll bet when she sees it, you two would race each other downtown to get one-piece suits." "That shows," Anne announced, "how well you know Mother." "Yes, sir," Martha nodded, obviously deriving a good bit of satisfaction from the mental picture. When she said it, you would be on your mark, get set, go. But she wouldn't say it, Anne insisted. She'd die if she saw you like that. All right, Martha surrendered. You're the boss. I've got to do what you say. I'll wear the rest of it, but I'm going to take a hem off of a foot at the bottom, and I positively draw the line at black stockings this summer. Martha got up, disdaining the offer of towels, and headed back toward the cottage. There was no doubt that Mother's suit never looked better. I think, Ernestine told Anne, that we could all do without the black stockings. No one wears them. Anne nodded. I was thinking the same thing. As Martha says, times do change. Even Dad would probably admit that. Probably. And you know she did look mighty cute in that one-piece job. I suppose she did, said Anne, in a childish sort of way. Of course. That's what I mean, in a childish sort of way. And it must be easier to swim when you just have one piece. I guess it is, Anne agreed. Lord knows I don't like the idea of two-piece suits any better than she does. But you know I can't repel any rules behind Mother's back. And, hey, wait a minute. Whose side are you on anyways? Yours, Ernestine said. I suppose. I wasn't going to take the outer part of my suit off, honest, just the stockings. Anne shaded her eyes and looked out at the float again. The tall, thin figure was still there. Will you take me out over my head now, Anne? Jack asked. Nobody ever takes me out over my head. I guess so, said Anne, putting on her bandana and shaking the sand from between the two layers of her outfit. She took Jack by the hand, and Ernestine took Bob, and they started slowly into the water.